Hey everybody, welcome back. So another one of the top 10 favorite films for each letter. Today with the letter U. Only a couple more left, so we're definitely getting down to some of the interesting letters. There's films on here, obviously I like them all. Very few of these I would consider favorites. So I really felt like I was putting movies on there just so I could get to 10. So I may not have any personal stories to share about many of these. First on the list though is UHF. Now this movie is absolutely hilarious. I mean, I saw it as a kid, so I do have an appreciation for it. Even seeing it now, it's just so ridiculous and so funny. There's so many good stuff in it that just cracks me up even to this day. Next up is John Hughes' Uncle Buck. Now this is another great comedy that now this one definitely belongs on the list. This is another one I grew up watching, and it's my favorite John Candy film with him in the lead. Definitely one of my favorite John Hughes films, and again, so many great lines in the film, so many. Next up is a very fun Steven Seagal movie, and that is Under Siege. Now at the time it was sort of in the wake of Die Hard, so you had a lot of movies that were very similar to Die Hard, where, you know, a group of terrorists sort of take over a location, and then there's one person who sort of fights them off. And in this case, it's a battleship, and of course, Steven Seagal is the cook on the ship, and he ends up being the one to kind of fight them off. And I think what is really good is that it's actually a pretty clever script, and there's a lot of humor in it, which I think helps a lot. And it's directed really well by Andrew Davis, who would go on to do The Fugitive. So it's definitely a fun one. Next up on the list goes in the opposite direction. This one's kind of weird and disturbing, and that is Under the Skin. Now this is one that is an interesting watch because it has certain aspects of it I think are a little experimental, which makes it interesting, especially from a filmmaking standpoint. But also Scarlett Johansson, you know, kind of took some chances with the part. So while it's not quite one I would sit down and watch at the drop of a hat, because it's also, you know, I think a little depressing, but it is, for me, definitely one of the more interesting films to come out within the last couple of years. Next one is Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, one that ended up being quite an interesting take on the Western, and especially to come from him, sort of to take almost like a more serious approach to what would normally be retribution type of Western. You know, instead of going the more action route, it's a much more serious, dramatic take on it. And in my opinion, very much deserving of the Academy Award. Next up is just a really well done, low budget sort of monster movie, and that's The Unnameable. The thing I like about it is that it has, you know, what it lacks in budgetary means, it makes up for you know, kind of a creepy atmosphere. And I really like the makeup job that was done on sort of the main monster character. And again, it sort of does have kind of an iconic poster, at least a little bit, you know, if you grew up seeing that image on like the VHS back in the day or something. Next up is definitely an easy one for me, and definitely my favorite of all of the U's on here, and that is Brian De Palma's The Untouchables. You know, what was basically an adaptation of a TV show became its own thing, and I think very much thanks to De Palma, and mixing his style with a, you know, what could have been just sort of a generic commercial project. Plus it was written by the great David Mamet, which I think definitely also helps. You know, it gives the film a bit more of an edge and gives that much more also to the characters. And obviously, you know, Sean Connery won the Academy Award, and I love this film so much. I actually watched it again not too long ago, and you know, man, even today, like, I just am still sort of mesmerized by the film. I love, oh god, the score to it. I absolutely love the music. And while it's not my favorite De Palma film, it's definitely kind of up there for me, especially since, again, it's so rewatchable. And like I said, definitely my favorite of all the ones on this list. Next up is Pixar's Up. Not a massive fan of the film as a whole, but there's a lot of parts to it that I really, really love. A couple humor bits in it that something like the squirrel bit I use all the time. But I will say what Up does have that I think is probably one of the best moments from any Pixar film specifically is that one sequence that sort of shows, like, you know, most of the life of the main character. It's one of the most touching and honest scenes in any, for sure, any Pixar film for me. Like, for me, the rest of the film doesn't quite live up to what makes that sequence so incredible. But even then, that sequence alone is enough to justify that film being on my list. Even just thinking about it got me slightly emotional. Next one is Urban Legends, and this is just a fun slasher film. It's one of the ones that sort of came in the wake wake of the success of Scream, where all of a sudden there were so many slasher films that were trying to be, another Scream. I mean, oh boy, did we get flooded with them. But this, I think, was kind of one of the better ones. And it's definitely one that I have a lot of fun with. And then finally on my list is The Usual Suspects. I went back and forth on this one. Not that I don't love the film, because I do, but some of the stuff about Bryan Singer that has come out, which actually was no surprise, I'd heard rumors for many years, has really sort of put a bit of a damper on the film for me. Like, I don't know if I could, at least right now, I couldn't watch it. I mean, I always try and separate the art from the artist as best I can, but sometimes in the immediate wake of things, you kind of like, I just need to back off for a little bit. But I decided to keep it on this list mainly because it is on its own an amazing film, and it's also written by Christopher McQuarrie, who did Jack Reacher, which I had on my J list, and he did the last two Mission Impossible films, which I love. So if anything, for the sake of Christopher McQuarrie, I decided to keep it on this list. And again, the film in and of itself is really amazing. So that's it for the letter U. Again, not as many personal tidbits as I have on previous lists. Definitely let me know your picks for the letter U if you have any. Keep an eye out for the next one, which should be the letter V, which I'm still working on. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.